What's up YouTube, I'm Guy, and today on the channel we are going to be checking out an Oris Divers 65, a really cool little watch, and one that, with the exception of a couple of little things, I really do love. I am enjoying checking out this watch, and a big thank you to my friends over at Exquisite Timepieces. They're of course an authorized dealer in the local Naples, Florida area. They've been in business here for over 20 years. They're a brick and mortar establishment that carries over 50 watch brands and has an outstanding selection of both new and pre-owned inventory. If you'd like to learn more about them, go over to their website, exquisitetimepieces.com, and if you happen to call them up and talk about watches, let Evan know that I say hi. Tell him that you heard about their store through my YouTube channel. So not too long ago, Exquisite Timepieces loaned me an Oris Aquis for review, and I really liked that watch. Now coming into this review with this watch, I was looking at it through the lens of comparison with that Aquis, and I came to the conclusion that it's not really fair to do it that way. They're really not that similar of watches. Now again, I really did like the Aquis, but I really like this watch too. And if push came to shove, I think I like this watch better. It's interesting that it's mostly in style and aesthetics, in the form of the watch, is why I prefer this one. The Aquis kind of strikes me as being not more high quality, but a more robust watch, maybe a little more refined. It has this sense of being over-engineered, and this watch doesn't have this. This watch is slender, it's sexy, it is very clearly vintage inspired. I just really dig the way that this watch presents. It's not really a quote-unquote small watch, but the way that it feels to me is that it wears smaller, which is an interesting sort of perspective to have on a watch like this. Alright guys, here we have it, the Oris Divers 65. The crazy long reference number on this model is 01733 3707 4064-0752022. Yeah, that's more than a mouthful. This watch has an MSRP of $1,850 in the United States. I have done a little looking around, and pre-owned, these watches tend to sell for, on eBay, if you look at sold listings, around $850 plus or minus. So a very big difference between MSRP, retail price, and pre-owned. I would imagine that on gray market, and even from the authorized dealer, there's some pretty good discounts to be had here. So I'm not in love with that $1,850 price point. I'll get that out of the way right now, but I do really like this watch, and I think if you're smart in your shopping, you can probably do a lot better. That said, let's move on to the specs and features. We have a case diameter, not including that large crown, of 40 millimeters with a lug width of 20 millimeters. An overall thickness on this watch of 13 millimeters and a lug-to-lug width from one extremity of the case to the other, or of course what I historically call the watch's wingspan, of 48 millimeters. All of those sizes sound pretty similar to a Rolex Submariner, to a lot of different watches as a matter of fact. But I have to tell you, to me in person, this watch is one of the few where I can say, hey, you know what, this actually wears a little smaller than the dimensions might suggest. And that's uncommon. Usually what I'm saying is, yeah, the dimensions are this, but it wears big. It's not frequent where I get to say the dimensions are this, but it wears small. This, for me, is actually that is the case on this watch. And it's interesting. It's one of the reasons why I like it so much. When I throw it on the wrist, I'll give you a little bit of a demonstration of how it looks. I think it wears beautifully on the wrist. The other specs and features about this watch. We have a double-domed sapphire crystal with AR coating on the underside. Because of how aggressively domed that crystal is, and I'll give you a nice profile of it so you can see, there is still reflections. You just can't get away from that on a crystal with this much of a dome. But it's still quite legible, and Very interesting that in some lighting conditions, especially being outside, when you get the sky reflecting on this dial, it has a little bit of like an optical effect where it doesn't look like a solid black dial. I'll get to that though once we get past all of the specs and features. Of course, we have a screw down crown at the 3 o'clock position. It's a rather large crown, as a matter of fact. We do have 100 meters of water resist, and as I had mentioned, a black dial. I think it's a little bit glossy, but it's hard to tell. But yeah, I think it is a little bit of a glossy black dial. Now, of course, we have the date complication at the 6 o'clock position, just above that large printed 6 numeral, down on the bottom side of the dial. The lume on this watch, on the markers and the handset, is what they're calling, of course, superluminova, but an old radium superluminova. I'll touch on that here in a little bit. Of course, we have a 120 click unidirectional bezel, and the strap that this comes on is what they call a beige textile strap, and it has nice stainless steel hardware. The movement, let's talk about that real quick. It's an Oris 733, which is effectively a base movement being a Sellita SW200-1. Oris does modify it a little bit, but that's what you're getting here. Sellita SW200. It's an automatic movement, 26 joules. Of course, it has hand winding and hacking, 38-hour power reserve, and it runs at the typical 28,800 vibrations per hour. Now, if you don't know, a Sellita SW200 is effectively a clone of the ETA 2824-2, which is a movement that is very reliable, if not somewhat standard. It's not, you know, an in-house movement. People don't get really excited when their watches have an ETA 2824-2 in it, probably more so when the watches start to get more expensive. This watch is a clone of that movement. How does Sellita make copies of the movement? I'm guessing probably patents have expired because that ETA movement has been on the market for a very, very long time. So, you know, they're able to make basically copies of it. Now, I was doing a little bit of research about this movement because I'm very interested in accuracy. And by the way, this does not have a display case back. The case back is just a screw down case back, so we can't really take a look at the movement. Nevertheless, I did some research on it because I am somewhat obsessed with accuracy, and I wanted to know, you know, how does this perform? In practical purposes, since I've had it here, it seems to be fairly accurate, but I wanted to see what other people were saying. Somebody on WatchUseek made a post, and it's maybe a couple years old at this point, about this watch and the Oris Caliber 733 movement, which is effectively, you know, again, a Sellita SW200. And what they found, because they regulated their watch, they took that case back off and got in there and made some adjustments to the timekeeping to make it run a little bit better. They found that this movement, at least back then, it's hard to say if it still works this way. The ordering process and manufacturing processes could have changed, but the movement has some parts from different grade Sellita movements. So you probably need a little history to know that ETA, and by extension Sellita, make their movements in different grades. There's 4 tiers. There's the standard, next up is the Elabor, next up is top grade, and then a COSC chronometer certified grade. So what this person found was that it was using the balance wheel that you would find in an Elabor grade movement, so the second tier, but it was using the Inca block shock absorbers that you would find in the top and chronometer grade movements, so that's the 3rd or 4th tier. And in their testing, they seem to think that potentially it was regulated in multiple positions. The Elabor and standard grade movements are only regulated in 3 positions, whereas the top and chronometer grade movements are regulated in more, 5 or 6 positions. And they suspect that this is regulated in 5 positions, but has parts from the different tiers. So what do we have here? I suspect what we have here is kind of a custom ordered movement. Oris probably places their order for or with the company Sellita that manufactures these movements, and they say, you know, we want this balance wheel, but we want those shock absorbers. And it's a little bit of maybe a hybrid in between. Now, this is, again, just sort of hearsay, but there were very detailed pictures supporting these claims by the person that did all of this research, and his name was Trevor W. Let me give credit where credit is due on WatchUSeek. So yeah, that is kind of the mystery of this movement. What do we have? What don't we have? We do know that from Oris, they suggest an accuracy range of -5 to +20 seconds per day in the user manuals for these watches. So, if, you know, long story short, that's what I was trying to find out, and I found all this other information. How accurate is it? From the factory, it's regulated to be -5 to +20. In a lot of people's experiences, it's more accurate than that. It seems to be more accurate than that in my experience with this watch as well. I really love the case of this watch, and I had mentioned in the spec section that this is a 13mm thick case, but a lot of that thickness is the crystal. If you look at the flanks of the case, it's very thin, very trim. The bezel, very thin, very low to the case. The case back does have a little bit of a bubble, but it's not super crazy bulging out of the bottom. So really, this wears more like maybe an 11mm thick watch. And yeah, I really love how sleek and sexy it is. As far as finishing, the finishing on it is great. It's high polished on the sides, the polishing is outstanding. On the tops of the lugs, we can see here a very nice brushed finishing. Not the absolute smoothest brushing, but you know, it's very good for the price point. There are no crown guards on the right-hand side of the case surrounding this large Oris signed crown. Again, very sleek. And yeah, I love the style of this case, and that is one of the reasons why this feels smaller than the overall dimensions or proportions, or because of the proportions, it feels smaller than the overall dimensions might suggest. To me, it just wears smaller than a 40mm watch, and I like it. There's other reasons as well, and we'll talk about those. But overall, yeah, the case is done very well. It's outstanding. The case back, you know, nothing super special. Signed with the Oris kind of shield logo there, a little bit of text on it. Screw down case. Nothing to write home about, but it is, you know, perfectly adequate. Now, like I mentioned, we have this screw down crown, and it's kind of oversized, but super excellent in terms of operating and manipulating the crown. The knurling or texturing on the crown is outstanding. Unscrewing the crown is very simple, just hardly no effort. The threading of the screw down portion of the crown tube is great. Once you get it out to this first position, the hand winding, as has been my experience with Solitas and of course by extension ETAs, is great as well. We have, as you would expect, the first position, which would let us quick set the date down there at the 3 o'clock, and then the second position, which hacks the movement and allows us to set the time. Yeah, this crown is so nice to work with. It's so easy to manipulate. I love it. I really do. Screwing it back down, just the slightest downward pressure, just give it some spins, and it's snug down. It's great. Some people are going to probably complain, though, that it's only 100-meter water resist. Alright, that's a fact. It is. It's not a real dive watch, that's what people are going to say, because it's only 100-meter water resist. Well, okay, I guess you have a point. But who cares? That's the way that I look at it. I'm never going diving. 99% of us aren't going diving with our watches, and the 1% of us that do probably don't go deeper than 100 meters. I'm sure that it is relatively uncommon. So this is perfect. Swimming, if you want to take it in the pool, certainly if you get caught in the rain or get it wet while you're washing your hands, putting it under the faucet and soaping it up a little bit to clean it, all of the things that you would commonly do with water and your watch, this is perfectly adequate for. I have no problems with the 100-meter water resist. If you do, if for no other reason than you like the idea of a watch being built for task, even if you're not going to participate in that task, hey, That's your prerogative. If this isn't the watch for you, then there's plenty of 200 and 300 meter divers out there. The bezel on this watch, overall I like it. I like the size and scale of it. The texturing of the bezel on the edge, very nice, very easy to operate. It's very low profile. It's got a slight downward slope. It is, of course, an aluminum bezel insert, but that insert is fully graduated. So we have, hash marks for every single minute. The printing on the bezel is perfectly adequate. It's about what you would expect. Yeah, there's only one real problem, and it's the action. The action is not outstanding, and it's mostly to do with backplay. The actual clicks, the feedback is good, but as you can probably see there, when you click it over and release it, sometimes it wants to go backwards. It'll sort of stick, but if I rotate it to the clockwise direction, it comes back. So you get that click. If I let go, sometimes it just springs back on its own. Sometimes you got to give it a little bit of a nudge. It's not the most solid bezel. It's not mushy though. And Seiko bezels, for example, when you're rotating those, they kind of feel spongy or mushy. You don't get that sensation. The actual clicks and the feedback from rotating the bezel is quite good. It's just a little bit loose, and there's a little bit of sloppy play in it. Once it clicks over, just a little bit of back play. Not outstanding for an almost $2,000 watch, but I can forgive it because there's so many other things that I like about it, including, the bezel assembly being solid black as well. I think that's a nice little touch. So normally you have a black insert with a stainless steel, silver tone bezel assembly. That's not the case here. I like this design choice that they did with solid black bezel insert and assembly. Yeah, just not the best action as I have seen in, these approaching $2,000 watches. We touched on that crystal. Again, it is double domed, AR coated on the underside. It has the vibe of an acrylic crystal. You don't get quite the same level of distortion that you might from an acrylic, plexiglass, or Hesselite crystal when you start angling it, but very nicely done. Very tall above the bezel, above the case, but I like the aesthetic. It's vintage inspired, so that's the vibe they're going for there. Again, you're going to get reflections no matter no matter how much air coating you have on a crystal with this much of a dome. But yeah, I really do like it. It's very clear, very legible. I haven't had any problems with it in the multitude of different lighting conditions that I've brought this watch into to try to read it. Yeah, overall, it's a very nice crystal. Let's come in even closer and take a look at this dial. So this dial is, first of all, using Superluminova Old Radium is what they call it. I'll bring in a lume shot for you. The lume is pretty good. It's a little bit brighter on the hands and the luminous pearl on the zero marker of the bezel than it is on the markers of the dial. Not a big deal, but you can see a little bit of a difference there. The dial itself is an entirely printed dial, so no applied markers, no applied logos. That's okay though for a watch that is taking design cues from a model that was from the 1960s, if I'm not mistaken. And the dial is a domed convex or concave? Concave? No, convex. I forget. But it is a slightly domed dial as well. I don't know how well you can tell there. Based on all of the bright lighting and a bit of glare that I'm getting, but you can kind of notice it when it's on your wrist. The outer edges are kind of curving down a little bit, and it's a really nice style. It's a really nice aesthetic. Again, yeah, no applied markers. It's printed numerals, printed hour markers. The seconds track, interestingly enough, is kind of brought inside of the hour markers, not something that you commonly see. I kind of like it. I think it's cool. And then the date down at the 6 o'clock position and Swiss made on either side interrupts that second track and cuts into the 6 o'clock marker ever so slightly. Overall, yeah, I really like this dial. Oris automatic up at the top, water resist 10 bar 100 meters down on the bottom. Very good balance and symmetry with all of the printing on the dial. Now, as you guys probably know, I'm not a fan of watches that use vintage style lume to make it look old or aged. In this case, though, it doesn't bother me so much because it kind of just looks like yellow printing. It doesn't give me that aged fake patina lume vibe that I get from a lot of other watches that do that. So I don't look at it from that perspective. Yeah, they call the lume old radium, but, you know, to me, again, it just kind of looks like yellow printing. I like it. It works for me. The handset is actually really nice. It works well for this watch. The style is a very simple pencil style, and the same lume that is on the dial is also on the hands, but you can see it's a little bit more pale, a little less yellow. Does it matter that it doesn't really match? I can tell you that in person, on your wrist, you don't even really notice the difference. Zoomed in as crazy tight as we are here is where it starts to become a little bit more apparent and obvious. So yeah, not a problem. I like that there's stainless steel polished hands. The seconds hand is a nice sort of needle style with a little bit of a lume lollipop pip out there towards the end, almost coming into contact with the seconds track, but, you know, not quite. The hour hand has the lume segmented there just a little bit, and it's a cool little design touch. Yeah, overall I think that the handset on this watch works really well. Let's talk straps. So this watch comes in a couple of different variations with different dial colors and different strap and bracelet options. I like this strap, but there's a few things I don't like. First of all, they call this a beige textile strap. It has stainless steel hardware, a pretty nice Oris signed stainless steel brushed buckle, 2 metal keepers that are sewn in, and then one floating like nylon textile, whatever it is, floating keeper. It's nicely stitched all the way around. You know, overall, the basic presentation is quite good. I have no complaints with that. Another cool thing about this strap is that it kind of conforms to the wrist and holds its shape really well. So once you get it on, unlike leather, which takes a long time to break in, this just immediately conforms. It stays put. It doesn't want to stretch back out straight so much. I like that as well. The problem with this strap is that there's a few hot spots. On this side here, right around where the pin buckle punches through, there's just a few little sharp bits of material that after a while start to cause discomfort on your wrist, at least in this specific example's case. I don't know if that would be the way that it would be on all of them, and I suspect maybe it wouldn't be. But yeah, in my experience with this one, when I'm wearing it, I get some hot spots right there, and it does irritate the wrist. Now I could get in there and maybe with some fine sandpaper and smooth it out, and I think that that would probably solve the problem. But if I had to make a complaint about this strap, that's basically it. Otherwise, yeah, I do like a lot of things about this strap. If I were to buy one, would I go with this option? I generally say get a bracelet if a bracelet is available. Just, it's a little bit safer. It's easy to get straps, especially at 20 millimeters. So, yeah, I guess I wouldn't, is what I should say. I wouldn't go for this strap option, but it's only because there's a bracelet option available. I had mentioned that I felt like this watch, despite the fact that it's more or less the same size as my Submariner there, feels smaller on my wrist. And I don't know, you guys tell me, you know, does it look like a big watch on my 6 3/4 inch wrist? Let me rotate it around just a hair so we can see how much real estate it's taking up. I got plenty of wrist left on the top and bottom. The crown, people are going to ask, does it interfere with your wrist? Look, I wear my watches way down towards my hand. I never really have a problem. Like, yeah, it touches your wrist, but so what? It doesn't hurt. It's not a problem. So yeah, that's just the way I wear my watches. I like them down low there. But yeah, I think that it does present smaller than similarly sized watches in my experience. I love it. I really do. I like the way that it looks and wears on the wrist. It's outstanding. I would definitely say that this is one of the more comfortably sized watches that I have tried out lately. I really do dig the overall shape, size, scale, dimensions, whatever you want to say. It works really well for me on my wrist, and I think if you had even a smaller wrist, it would work really well for you too. Certainly as your wrist size goes up, you might feel differently, but there it is, 6 3/4 inch wrist. I think it's perfect. So there it is. That's the presentation of the Oris Divers 65. Definitely digging this watch. I will jump over to the studio view and wrap this up with some of my final thoughts or closing thoughts, so don't run off just yet. Stick with me for a few more minutes. So what can I say about the Oris Divers 65? I really like it. There are, as I had mentioned in the tabletop, some negatives about this watch. The bezel action is not outstanding, but I could probably give that a pass because I like everything else about it. Very low profile. I like the size and scale of it. The texture or knurling on the edge is great. Operating the bezel, there's no problems whatsoever. Just a little bit sloppy in its lockup when you fit it into, or set it rather, into position. The crown is absolutely great. The crystal, outstanding. The movement, yeah, it's a base model Solita movement, but it's pretty accurate. They're very good movements in my experience, so I'm happy with that. There's just a ton to like here, but there's one other downside, if you will, and that's the price. $1,850 MSRP. It feels a little bit steep to me. I don't think that people are generally going to be buying this watch at full MSRP, though. Certainly, I would think that at the dealer you could get a discount. There's also gray market and pre-owned options. I looked on eBay for a few minutes, and it seemed like the most recent sold versions of this watch went in the ballpark of around $850 plus or minus. So if you want a super deal, pick one up pre-owned for $850. Seems like that might be the way to go if you're extremely value conscious. But yeah, a little bit of haggling, I think you could do a heck of a lot better than that MSRP, and if you can get it for a good price, I would absolutely recommend it. Well, that's going to wrap this video up for today. I hope you enjoyed checking out this Oris Divers 65 with me. Big thumbs up here. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Thanks for tuning in. As always, if you'd like to help support the channel, down in the description, there's a ton of ways that you can help me out. Following me on my social media accounts, of course, contributing over on Patreon, and a big thanks to all the guys that have been over there contributing. I really do appreciate it. Finally, if you like something that I reviewed and you want to purchase it, I have links to Amazon through my affiliate account. If you click on that link first, before you do your shopping, doesn't matter what you buy, I do get a small commission, and those commissions do add up. A big thanks to everyone that's been using those Amazon affiliate links. I really do appreciate that as well. So, for now, I'm going to go ahead and sign off and say bye now.